Salam sejahtera, anda bersama saya Rizal Zulkapli dan ini Niaga AWANI. Kita mulakan dengan perkembangan dalam negara. Angka KDNK Malaysia akan terjejas selepas banyak industri ditutup berikutan pelaksanaan PKP 3.0. Menurut Menteri Kewangan Tengku Datuk Seri Zafrul Abdul Aziz dalam sidang media pada hari Selasa, kerajaan masih membuat anggaran impak dan mungkin ada semakan. Sebelum ini, kerajaan jangka ekonomi Malaysia akan tumbuh dalam lingkungan 6 ke 7.5%.
Beliau membuat kenyataan berkenaan dalam sidang media pada Selasa selepas ditanya mengenai hutang berkanun negara yang berada pada 58.5% susulan pengumuman mengenai pakej bantuan Pemerkasa Plus. Ketika mengulas mengenai kenyataan Perdana Menteri Tan Sri Yassin sebelum ini yang menyatakan bahawa kedudukan kewangan negara adalah agak mencabar, Tengku Zafrul berkata ini disebabkan negara berada dalam krisis tetapi terdapat wang untuk membiayai perbelanjaan itu iaitu melalui peningkatan pinjaman. Beliau menjangka defisit belanjawan negara telah melepasi apa yang kerajaan ketepikan ketika ia diumumkan di Parlimen pada November tahun lalu. Baru-baru ini Tengku Zafrul umum menyemaknya semula pada 6.0%. Tambahnya ia dijangka naik terutamanya melihat kepada KDNK yang mungkin akan disemak semula ke bawah. Menurutnya dalam mengumpul dana bagi membiayai pakej rangsangan, salah satu pilihan adalah untuk menjimatkan perbelanjaan negara, mengawal atau mengutamakan semula beberapa perbelanjaan. Kedua, kerajaan boleh melihat sama ada terdapat lebih banyak dividen atau pendapatan daripada ekosistem kerajaan yang merangkumi badan berkanun serta syarikat berkaitan kerajaan. Manakala ketiga, yang telah dilakukan oleh kerajaan dan mungkin terus dibuat adalah dengan menambah hutang.
Dan sidang media yang diberikan Menteri Kewangan mengekori pengumuman Pelan Pemerkasa Plus yang diumumkan pada Isnin. Pelan berkenaan bernilai RM40 bilion dan dengan sekitar RM5 bilion adalah suntikan fiskal. Dan kita ingin melihat kepada kenyataan Perdana Menteri yang menjelaskan kerajaan mempunyai kedudukan kewangan yang terhad. Dalam temu bual kami bersama dengan Ketua Pakar Ekonomi Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad Dr. Afzal Nizam dalam Niaga AWANI pada Selasa, beliau menjelaskan yang Bank of International Settlement dalam kajian 2011 mendapati 85% hutang kerajaan berbanding KDNK adalah had maksimum sebelum ia memberi kesan negatif kepada pertumbuhan. Dan hari ini kita ingin terus membincangkan berkenaan dengan Pelan Pemerkasa Plus dan gesaan untuk meningkatkan kadar hutang kerajaan terutama ketika krisis ini. Kita bersama Felo Pelawat Research For Social Advancement Berhad, Hafiz Noor Shams. Hafiz, izinkan saya meneruskan bahasa Inggeris. Thank you for joining us, Hafiz. Your response to the latest stimulus package announced by the PM on Monday, you said it was severely underwhelming. Why severely underwhelming? What was that relative to the total lockdown that was announced?
When I think about when I claim it to be severely underwhelming, I was thinking about what do we need to solve the current crisis once and for all. So that means putting all the available resources to end what we are suffering right now. That means having a lockdown and having a proper lockdown and making sure that lockdown works. So this means not adding up, just spending 5 billion or 1 billion or 10 billion, actually ramping up spending significantly to, I think at least from what I understand what AXA wants is really raise the capacity of the healthcare system, not just for COVID but other purposes. We have to remember as well, just because the COVID, other health problem doesn't go away. Second is to hasten vaccination. I think that's the second key. And third, when you have a lockdown, you have to have proper lockdown. And if you want to have a proper lockdown, you have to provide the financial assistance to the people affected by the lockdown. So that means possibly generous cash transfer or even some kind of universal basic income for several months or even 6 months, I guess. So that would require a lot of cash. And
But on that note, Hafiz, what measures did you think were adequate and what measures did you feel could have been much better?
I think the total amount, the total actual government spending has to be much bigger than 5%. I'm thinking about maybe 40 or 50 billion, and that would raise the fiscal deficit from 6% of GDP to about 9 or 10, or might be higher if you want to be more ambitious. You just need whatever it takes to solve the crisis.
And this, I believe, would perhaps increase government's debt. Do you think now is the right time to increase the government's debt? It is now around 58.5% of GDP. Can we go to perhaps 65 to 70%? You know, even Bank of International Settlement suggested about 85% maximum.
Right. So, I mean, I think first of all, we have to go back to basics, right? We have to understand what is debt. And debt always has a purpose. It just when you talk about debt, whether it's sustainability, you have to think about the purpose. If the purpose of debt is just to pay non-existing asset in Venezuela to buy to help some kind of GLC buy a non-existing asset in Caspian Sea or Venezuela, or build a non-existing pipeline in Sabah, that's a problem. But if your debt is for productive purposes, to actually save life, to actually raise capacity of the health system or even the education system, that's sort of an investment, right? It's not money going nowhere. It's an investment that would return to you some kind of future in terms of better growth or that kind of stuff. So to come back to your numbers, I mean, different countries have different level of debt they can swallow. And I think at the moment, at least, Malaysia do have the space to raise that. You have to also remember that the debt level, the 60% debt level, that's a legal limit. It's not an economic limit. It's just a number on the paper, and the finance minister can change that without parliamentary approval. It's just it's a number in the appendix of some law that I can't remember the name. And yet you also have to remember, given that right now we have 58% of GDP debt, the statutory debt, that doesn't cover all that. And at the same time, if you want to play the ratings game, even at that level, we are A- or B+, depending on your rating agencies. It's still a long way to go before we fall to BB-, I suppose. So that could go to as high as 70%, honestly. Yeah. So I don't think we should be worried that much about raising the debt level at the moment.
And also
it has a purpose. Yeah.
And also, Hafiz, there are discussions online saying that currently about 85 to about 90% of the government debt is held by or held by the local institutions, right? How is that helping the situation?
Well, that means we don't have to worry about forex that much. But I think the more important part is really that there's still a lot of demand for local debt, right? You can raise debt, you can raise bonds, government bond, quite a lot before customer debt can happen, and there's still be demand. And EPF alone is 1 trillion, about $1 trillion ringgit, has 1 trillion ringgit worth of asset that you can just buy bonds if they want. That's just EPF, doesn't include PNB, doesn't include Co-op, whatever else.
And Hafiz,
so there's still a lot of time.
Hafiz, according to Shahriar Hamdan, one sector's deficit is another sector's surplus. What can this money be spent on?
If you talk about government deficit, I mean the government borrowing and spending, right now we just need to raise the capacity. That I mentioned just now, we raise capacity of the health system, hasten the vaccination process by more and faster, and provide assistance to people that are affected by the lockdown, that were affected badly.
Why do you think it's such a taboo to discuss raising the debt ceiling?
Well, I think it's a momentum from previously. I mean, throughout the 1990s, I suppose, 2000, there were a lot of crises and debt went up the bat, and there was an impetus to control that level, right? And we had a little globally, not Malaysia so much, but globally, like the US and the UK in 2009, they had a sovereign debt crisis. So that causes some kind of fear in terms of debt level, in terms of high debt level. So it's a historical momentum, I suppose. But again, we have to remember debt are bad depending on the purpose. If the purpose is nonsense, then debt can be bad. But if the purpose is actually productive, or actually even to save life, it's necessary. I mean, if you think about the Second World War, debt during the Second World War go up because you have to make a spending, or else you're going to lose the war. I'm not trying to say that we are going to war, but it's the same parallel. We are in a severe crisis, and we need the debt. We need the money we need the resources to fight the crisis, or else we might as well give up and die, I suppose.
And the government could recover this money back and manage its debt better when economy gets better, right?
Yes, that's the thing. When you think about raising debt, we have to think about not just like in 1 year or 2 years, right? Because we live, but our life expectancy about 80 years for each generation. So you have to think about long term, in 10 years, 15, 20 years, and you have to, if you want to do fiscal consolidation, you have to think about this very, very long term. You cannot just do 5 years, or they're going to shock the economy. So when you think about that, you have to also think about Malaysia is still a young economy. Our median age is about 29, 30 years old. And there's still people on the net going into the labor market in normal times. And the economy is going to keep growing. And if the economy is growing, that automatically is growing. It's not growing like 2% or 1%. It's growing about 4%, 5%, sometimes if you like 6%. That's going to automatically reduce the debt burden over the long run. So I think these details need to be kept in mind whenever we talk about raising the debt at the moment to fight the crisis.
And you also wrote or said the latest program proves this government is reactive to events and always one step behind. How can the government be one step ahead when the nature of COVID-19 itself is very uncertain?
Yes, it's true. The nature of COVID-19 is very uncertain. And even last year, we don't know a lot about COVID-19. But that is a call to adopt precautionary measures, right? In terms of, if you be in precaution about approaching the problem and you make sure that you have all the necessary resources that you need to fight. That means, for instance, these are things are bygone right now, fish under the water, but this is one of the reasons why during budget 2021, we needed a much bigger budget. But in budget 2021, what happened was that the government decided to do fiscal consolidation immediately in 2021, even when we were in crisis. That's just a misprioritization of policy. So that's what I mean by, not being one step behind. You provide the necessary resources at the start. And when you provide the necessary resources, this is just not 5 billion, 10 billion. You provide proper resources for everybody to play their part. When they don't have resources, they cannot play their part. And when they cannot play their part, then we're mugging along like we're doing right now.
Speaking of Budget 2021, do you think the government should perhaps review Budget 2021 and reallocate funds to where it matters most now? Do you think there should be, say, a three-month review of Budget 2021, or at least constant reviews? I think that was also suggested by Tengku Zafrul yesterday. Do you think this should be done constantly?
Yeah, possibly. We have to remember again that we are in crisis. We don't have the luxury to wait for another calendar year for a review, right? It has to be done now or quickly as possible. And it's not just a review; you just have a proper spending, a proper spending to fight the crisis. It cannot wait for November to pass budget 2022, for instance. It cannot wait for another calendar year.
And lastly, before we end the interview, you also said dasar cukup makan, but surely the government can't be spending like there's no tomorrow, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, because there is tomorrow, we need to fight the crisis, right? That's because there is no tomorrow. We have to borrow and spend and make sure that we survive. But the fact is that there is still a lot of room to borrow. The one that is putting us back is really legal limits. And legal limits are not economics. Legal limits is just something on paper that lawyers put or some constitutional expert put. It's just something on paper. It's not something economics. So if we address legal limits, I think the government finance can take up a lot more debt and make sure that we come out of this crisis, not dead.
On that note, thank you very much, Felo Pelawat Research for Social Advancement Berhad Hafiz Noor Shams membincangkan berkenaan dengan kadar hutang dan juga keperluan untuk kerajaan membelanjakan lebih lagi untuk memastikan bahawa ekonomi akan pulih dan juga kita dapat keluar daripada krisis COVID-19 ini. Kita akan berehat seketika kembali selepas ini.